Uploading.
That's the thing about faith. If you don't have it, you can't understand it. And if you do, no explanation is necessary.
When dealing with religion, even in these times, there are still some instances where a caveat is apparently needed. This discussion is going to be on my opinion of what a model religious person is in a fictional universe. If that doesn't jive with you, that's fine. I'm not sure why this is even an issue, to be honest. It's also surprising to me that in 2021 there are still sensitive religious people whom get upset if I put the word Jesus in a thumbnail or refer to time with appropriate terms like CE or BCE. Guys, if an all-powerful God, or gods, do truly exist, then said being, or beings, won't really be upset at my terminology. What they probably would get upset with is me deflowering virgins and then forcing them to fight in a brutal Game of Thrones-style gladiator combat where they have to kill each other.
A Bajoran draws courage from his spiritual life. Our life force is replenished by the prophets.
Before we can truly discuss Kira and her impacts on the Trek universe, we first need to analyze the Bajoran religion, at least somewhat. Since the beginning of time, at least according to the Bajorans, they have received messages and guidance from the heavens. It was believed that these entities, these gods, would watch over the entire Bajoran people, give them bounty when they are faithful, and help them when they are going through times of stress. These creatures would even consider themselves of Bajor. When looking at Kira Nerys, well, she was what Dukat would call the embodiment of New Bajor. Whether you like the guy or not, he wasn't exactly wrong. Kira grew up as a child during the Cardassian occupation. She joined the Bajoran resistance, and a lot of her formative years were fighting and killing Cardassians. Her mother became a mistress and was assaulted by the very people Kira was fighting, and she would be so gung-ho to eviscerate the Spoonheads that she wouldn't be there when her father died. She also had two brothers whose fates are unknown. I bring up all of this historically because when she moved into working for the Bajoran militia, which was overseen by the provisional government, she had a duality. There were two sides to her. One was her nature that told her she still needed to fight, even though that part of her life was over. Relatively so, and that she needed to start rebuilding. And then there was her spiritual side. Today's focus is more going to be on her spiritual side, even if her warrior-like nature does inform that as well. And yeah, it's taken 4 paragraphs to finally get to the topic, so we're doing good for one of my essays. When we first meet Kira, as stated, she was pretty hostile and violent. She wasn't trusting of many and wanted Bajor for Bajorans. Her faith still existed, but her need for violence seemed to be at constant war with some of the tenets of what she believed. She isn't as faithful as she would one day become, at least in my opinion, and ultimately, we would see that evolution. As her need or drive to fight diminishes, her spirituality would rise. Whether this is because she is being calmed by the hand of her gods or because she matures is left up to interpretation, but I think it's both in some ways.
I know to Starfleet, the prophets are nothing more than wormhole aliens. But to me, they're gods. I can't prove it. Then again, I don't have to, because my faith in them is enough.
And add on to that she has had both sides of what being faithful is meant. When we're first introduced to the character, she hasn't met her gods. The Celestial Temple hasn't opened up. She believes in things unseen. And ultimately, when the wormhole aliens are discovered, she now believes in something that is tangible. Arguably, to some, ungodlike because now you can actually measure it. But her faith never falters. On that topic, I must admit a little bit of surprise when some were commenting on my video saying that they really didn't like Kira's faith or believe that it was true, because specifically, she had evidence of the wormhole alien's existence. I don't know, to delight and require that faith be in things unseen is an amazing proposition to me. I would almost argue that Kira's religion, her faith, is much more substantial because she believed in something she couldn't initially prove, and then the prophets reveal themselves and she can prove it. I don't know, I guess this is just murky, but religious people who want to stay in the dark, it's just weird. Also, I'm not saying you're a bad person if you believe faith requires not being able to see your god or gods, so it's just an interesting subject for me. So we know that Kira has had faith regardless of whether there is evidence or not, which is very on point for a religious individual. But let's look at how her understanding of her religion has evolved over time.
Teaching a fundamentally different philosophy.
I'm not teaching any philosophy. What I'm trying to teach is pure science.
Some might say pure science, taught without a spiritual context, is a philosophy, Mrs. O'Brien.
While I truly believe that Kira becomes one of the best religious figures in Trek history, I don't think she started out that way. Which is great, but I'll get into that in a minute. A good example of this is in the Deep Space Nine episode, In the Hands of the Prophets. I honestly forgot how fundamentalist Kira was. She legitimately believed that science was a religion, and that they should have separate but equal schools for the religious and the secular. It is just wild to see her in her early years. But again, it also shows just how awesome she is, because the dirty little secret is, as Kira grows, so would her understanding of what the prophets wanted her to do. The universe of Trek, like the universe in reality, isn't generally static. By the end of this very same episode, she is horrified at what ultra-fundamentalism does to people, and how those people can be manipulated by it.
I answered their call. The prophets spoke. I answered their call.
For those who haven't seen the episode in a while, there is a woman who believes the prophets tell her to kill a religious figure. I would argue that Kira was just like that woman at the beginning. Though I doubt she would have killed a religious figure, she might have been talked into why it was okay. But by the end, she realizes how folly that is, and that people who aren't of her faith aren't that bad either. I truly think that this episode begins her evolution. Kira is guided by her faith and even molded by it. That doesn't mean she doesn't do what needs to be done, though, even if it goes against what she believes. In one episode, she is willing to cut off heaven to save her people, arguably going against her gods. She's still faithful, but she does what's best for everyone, even if she believes that she is damning herself. Though technically you could still argue that while Kira was in rebellion, this was a part of the Prophet's plans. What she did would ensure that the wormhole stays open forever, so perhaps they were using her even when she was at her, shall we say, weakest point. And again, one might argue that that's what gods do. They use the rebellious to have their will be done, which I could only see bolstering Kira's beliefs. How she believes and understands the prophets would continue to move forward, a link being formed between her and her gods. I honestly think that a lot of it will culminate into who she is and what kind of religious person she ultimately becomes. This is personified in the Deep Space Nine episode Treachery, Faith, and the Great River. Now, a lost art...
I don't think I'll ever forget the look on his face when he died. He seemed so... content.
The last thing he saw was one of his gods smiling at him. If you ask me, he was a lucky man. I can't prove it. Then again, I don't have to, because my faith in them is enough. Just as Wayun's faith in you was enough for him.
If ever there was one in 2021, is trying to judge a person by who they are now and not who they were. Kira was originally a fundamentalist, pretty hardcore. But in this episode, we see that she's a person that completely believes that her gods are gods, but she doesn't know how to prove it, and she doesn't care if others believe it or not. She allows for other religions and even rejoices when others find solace in who they believe to be the actual gods. To put it simply, she's someone that believes what she believes, but can appreciate that others feel differently, and she doesn't look at it as being undermined. She encourages others to experience who they are and to connect with whatever form of god they believe in. I don't know if the Bajoran religion states that there are multiple gods from different religions. I kind of hope that it doesn't, though, because it makes her choices here all that more special. She is a true believer, but still grounded. She doesn't push her beliefs, and this, for me, is how you can ultimately change and convert a galaxy. You be the best person that you can be, inspired by your gods, and show the light that they portray. But all of these are my opinions. What are yours? Let me know in the comments below. Don't forget to rate, comment, subscribe, and I'll see you on the next Lore Reloaded.